My special guest today is a lady that's described as classy, compassionate, and witty. She's a good cook, and I understand that she's a very good golfer. I'm talking about Grand Ole Opry star Jan Howard. Hi, Jan.
Hey, Earl. How are you doing?
Doing fine, doing fine. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great. Just trying to put on a face, and it takes longer every day.
Are you still cooking quite a bit?
Yeah. Well, not quite a bit, but I like to cook, and I'm always coming up with recipes and everything that I want to try out. And of course, I don't have, family at home anymore, so it's difficult to cook for one. So I cook and give it away.
How's your health holding out?
Fine, thank you.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
Yeah, I'm very blessed and very fortunate. I know that. I try to walk, and I enjoy walking when the weather isn't this hot.
It has been quite warm lately. That's true.
Yeah, well, one day I go over to the, I say one day. Quite often I go over to a place called Green Hills Mall here in Nashville. It's good walking indoors. And I ran into Ray Walker of the Jordanaires. Are you familiar with Ray?
Oh, sure, yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I've known them forever. And Ray said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Hey, I'm walking, and I'm looking down at the ground."
And what did Ray say?
He laughed, and he said, "Me too."
Well, there's a song, a gospel song, that I would say fits your life perfectly. God on the mountains and God in the valleys. And I know you've heard that song. You've experienced a lot of mountaintops, but your life has also had some valleys in it.
Yes, it has. And but I believe that each time you experience one of the valleys, if you survive it and pray for strength, God will give you the strength to climb that mountain, the next mountain. You can't always stay on the top. That's life, and there are going to be valleys, and I just try my best to get through the valleys with God's help. Corky, his real name is Carter, and he's my middle son. And each time I sing "Wind Beneath My Wings," I always dedicate it to him, because he definitely has been the wind beneath my wings, and through a lot of trials and through the deaths of his two brothers.
What about his growing up? What type of boy was Carter growing up, Jan?
What type of boy was he?
Was he sports-minded like...
No, Jimmy, the oldest boy, was sports. Well, Corky went out for football when he was a freshman in high school, but he didn't weigh very much. And I think he got a slight injury, and he said, I don't think I'll do that anymore. And but he's an outdoors person. He loves to hunt and fish, and his business is here in actually Madison, Tennessee, and but he has a farm down in Dixon. He loves, when he wants to get away from stress and get away from the office and everything like that, he goes to his farm, puts on his jeans and whatever, gets on his tractor and mows everything that doesn't move. And so he's an outdoors person.
Now, you lost 3 sons, didn't you?
2.
2, okay.
Yeah.
You lost your son in Vietnam. That was Jimmy, I believe.
Yes, it's Jimmy. And Jimmy and Corky were both in Vietnam at the same time. And Corky was Jimmy's escort home. And then 3.5 years later, my youngest son took his own life. His name was David, and he was such a tender-hearted person, loved everybody and everything, and he was strictly an entertainer. He he was in I Hear America Singing at Opryland when it first opened. And but yeah, he had a beautiful voice, and he was handsome. Did all the off-Broadway shows here in Nashville, and very, very talented. But when Jimmy was killed, he just couldn't handle it, and he had a nervous breakdown. He just emotionally, he never was able to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just
devastating.
Yes.
What type of son was Jimmy growing up? Was he an outdoorsman, a sportsman, or?
Jimmy loved to. He loved sports. He practiced. He played basketball, and he loved to. I mean, he just loved basketball. He loved to play golf. He started playing golf when he was about 11 years old, and I told him, now golf is not a inexpensive hobby, and so I said, you save up the money until you have enough to play golf, and you can play golf, but or you work to earn your money, and that's what he did, and he was very good. Archie Campbell used to live across town from us. At that time, we lived in Madison, and Archie Campbell had a home in Brentwood, and which is 25 miles from where we lived. And Archie, who was a very good golfer, he would drive from Brentwood to Madison, take Jimmy to play golf. And he said when he's 16, buy him a set of matched golf clubs, because said he can be a pro if he wants to be. And so I did that. And when Jimmy was home 21 days before he went to Vietnam, he played golf every day. And that's exactly what I wanted him to do. And the last day, he polished the clubs and put them away. And he said, "They'll be there when I get home." I kept those clubs for several years, and but every time I would look at them, it just well, I knew that he wouldn't want them sitting in a closet.
Yeah.
And so I told Corky one day, I said, find a boy that loves the game as much as Jimmy did and give him the clubs. But I said, I don't want to know who he is. And one day I came home and the clubs were gone. Of course, I cried for hours. But I know some boy was getting some good out of those clubs. And that's what Jimmy would want.
Did Jimmy decide to sign up for the military, or was he drafted? I know the draft
Jimmy was drafted.
He was drafted. Okay.
He was just beginning his second year at MTSU, and they weren't supposed to draft him out of school if they had a B average, which he did, but they did. And he came home one day. Of course, Murfreesboro is only 30 miles, and he came home quite often, and even though he had an apartment down there, which he shared with 3 other boys. And he came home one day and stopped at the mailbox before he came in, and he said, he came in and he was looking through the mail, and he said, "Guess what? I got a letter from the president." That was his draft notice.
I had one of those myself.
Oh, yeah. So, anyway, he was drafted, and exactly 2 months to the day when Jimmy was drafted, Corky volunteered. And he said, if Jimmy's going, I'm going. And so that's the way it went. When Jimmy got his orders for Vietnam, Corky volunteered. Because you couldn't send 2 brothers unless one was a volunteer.
Yes.
And, so that's, but I think things work out somehow the way they're supposed to, because Corky was in Vietnam. He was about 40 miles from where Jimmy was, and he was there to bring Jimmy home. But there were beautiful letters between the two of them, and each one of them, Jimmy. Well, if I received a letter from Jimmy, he'd say, "I'm going to try my best to get Corky to send home. One of us here is enough." And every letter I'd receive from Corky, he'd say, "Now that I'm here, I'm going to try to get Jimmy sent home." So it was a beautiful love between two brothers, and as it happened, Corky was there to bring Jimmy home.
How did you find out that Jimmy's life had been taken there in Vietnam?
I was home that morning, and there were two officers came to my door, and they notified me, but I had the feeling ever since Jimmy was drafted that he would not survive it.
I believe you had a dream that
I did.
Your son would be killed, and you wrote a song, didn't you?
Yes. Well, actually, the song, My Son, was written as a letter to Jimmy, and Corky was home on leave before he went to Vietnam, and I read it to him, and he said, "You need to put that to music." He said Jimmy would be so proud. And so I just kind of strummed the guitar, and it just came to me. I mean, nothing was changed or anything. It was a letter put to music. And
became a #1 song.
Yes. 2 weeks after the song was released, Jimmy was killed. And I couldn't get through it in the studio. I couldn't get through it. And Bill Anderson said, you've got to record that. And but I couldn't get through it without crying. And Owen Bradley, my producer, said, "Now, Jan, it's just another song." And I said, "No, Owen, it's Jimmy's life." And 2 weeks later, he was killed. And afterwards, I received a letter from some soldier in his troop, in his unit, and he told me that Jimmy had used his tape recorder. Well, Jimmy, he wrote me. I sent him a little 7.5 reel,
Mm-hmm.
And just told him I had a surprise for him. And but he didn't have anything to play it on. Anyway, this young soldier said he used his equipment to play the song on. And he said Jimmy did hear it and said he was so proud that he cried. And after that, I received many, many letters from Vietnam. Said they played it every day in Vietnam like it was the national anthem. I was very honored, very honored.
You did an entire project for God and Country.
Yes.
And let's see, the 23rd Psalm, the Night Watch, the Old Rugged Cross, and another one that I use quite a bit, I Am. In fact, we get requests for that, during Memorial Day and Veterans Day and July 4th.
Well, I received, speaking of 23rd Psalm, I received a letter from Jimmy's chaplain. And he said that morning, Jimmy drove an APC, an armored personnel carrier, and like a tank, Every morning they had to ask for volunteers to take the first tank out. And he said Jimmy had volunteered, and Jimmy came to the chaplain and recited the 23rd Psalm. And that's why I did that. And it helped to know, but Jimmy was as all my boys were very Christian young men.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy was president of the MYF at church, the Methodist Youth Foundation, and he and David both sang in the choir. Corky was in the midst of everything. So they were all Christian young boys. They were all baptized on the same day, and they were baptized on Palm Sunday. And so I had no doubt where their heart and soul was. And
you know, Jan, excuse me, that's the hope that anyone, especially a mother of a young soldier who has trusted Christ, that's the hope that you have, that based on the Scripture, you're going to see both of your sons again someday.
Absolutely. When I go to the cemeteries, and they're buried across the street from each other, Jimmy's buried in the National Cemetery, and David is across the street, I know that they are not there. I know that. It's just their last resting place there. I know where they are. And I do know that we'll all be together again one day.
That's that blessed hope that we have, that we'll be reunited. I can't sit here behind this microphone and say that I know what you're going through, because I don't, or what you have been through.
Well, I'm thankful you don't.
But to mothers and fathers who have lost loved ones, and one reason for this interview is we've had several young men in our area that have lost their lives in Iraq. And I said, I'm going to run down my good friend Jan Howard, because I know that she can offer these families some words of encouragement, because she's been there and she's experienced exactly what they're going through right now.
Well, I'll tell you, Earl, my heart bleeds every time I hear of losing another soldier. And but if it's any consolation to anyone, it's grief mixed with pride. My sons believed in this country, and they believed in what they were fighting for. And even though I'd give the world to be able to see them, but I won't here, but I will. But they believed in this country. They believed in our freedom. And some of the last words Jimmy said was, he said, I never heard of Vietnam until a short time ago. He said, Corky and I have a job to do, and you have a job to do, Mom. Because he said, we know we won't have to worry about you. And I said, no, you won't. And he said, all I want to do is go to school and go to church and be with my friends and family. But he said, if everybody did that, we'd be in trouble. He said, so if I have to give 1 year of my life to protect the way I believe and my friends and family, I'll gladly do so. And I know that was in his heart. And I know that Corky felt the same way. So this country, as the saying goes, freedom is not free. And it's never been free. If anybody wants to have proof of that, if they need proof, they need to visit a national cemetery, or they need to go to the veterans hospitals. They need to go see the people that have fought, served, sacrificed, and died for things that a lot of people here take for granted. And I never take it for granted. I have a lot of friends in the military now, and some of them are in Vietnam. I mean, in Iraq. And I don't know any that have ever griped, that have ever said anything, but we have a job to do. And I respect them to the highest degree.
Jan, your recording, I Am, I believe, sums up pretty well what you've just said. Tell me about this recording, I Am.
Yes, that was written by Corky, my middle son, after he came back from Vietnam. And he was assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And since they didn't know what to do with him right at first, he was guarding the stockade. And one of the prisoners came up to him one day and said, "What's so great about being an American and wearing that uniform?" And Corky said, "I'll think about it and give you my answer." And he went back to his barracks. Corky told me this. And he wrote, "I am." And I have the original lyrics. It was written on a notepad where he just torn it out of a notepad, you know. And that's his answer. And how I came across it, the reason I have that, Corky, he would come home sometimes on weekends or something like that, or maybe just overnight from Fort Campbell. And I would always do the laundry that he brought home, you know, which boys do. And I was, you know, as you do, you check to make sure there's not something in the pockets. And that was just folded up very small in his shirt pocket. And he wasn't home, and I just took it out and I read it because it was just in his shirt pocket. And I sat there and cried. Corky is a very deep-thinking man and very deep feeling. And, of course, he was heartbroken at the loss of his brother because they were very, very close, all three of them were. And when he came home, I told him I'd found it and that I had read it. And I said, "Corky, everybody needs to read this." He said, "No, Mom, that's my private thoughts." I said, "Well, sometimes I think you need to share those private thoughts." I said, "More people need to be reminded what the soldier does and why." And so he finally consented for me to record it in that album. And I said, "This is for Jimmy, Corky." And I received a letter, many letters, but one in particular stands out in my mind. It's from a 12-year-old boy. I think he was in the 6th grade. Somewhere. I can't remember. I'm sure I still have that letter. He said they had read that in his class that morning. And he said, "I think every student needs to hear that." And that was from a 12-year-old boy. And I thought, I said, I pray that he doesn't, but one day he may be one of those soldiers. He was 12.
Do you get a lot of mail from those in the military, Jan?
Oh, yes. Yeah, they've kind of adopted me, or I've adopted them. In fact, just recently, I worked Dollywood for a week, and I went to dinner at a place called Carrabba's up there. And what was really strange was that I hadn't planned to go there at all. I planned to go somewhere else, and somehow I drove out there, and I said, "I don't want to eat here." And I drove past a couple of other places that I had eaten before, and I just kept driving. I was almost back to the hotel, and I thought, I've got to stop and eat. And I saw Carrabba's, and I just whipped in the lot there and went in, and I had just ordered, and this young man was getting a to-go order, and he came over to me, and he said, "I can't believe that I ran into you here. I can't believe that we're both in the same place." And he said he was Sergeant Jeff, can't remember his last name. Anyway, he was in the military. And he said he had been a fan for a long time, and he wanted to know if he could talk with me. And I said, "Sure." And he sat down, and I told him I just worked Dollywood, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I didn't know that." And he said, "But we're here on a meeting of some sort." And so we talked for quite a while, and then I said, "I'll tell you what, come with me." And I took him out to the car, and I had some CDs in the car. And I gave him the Jan Howard collection, and I gave him The Forgotten Country. And I just received an email from him yesterday and he told me how much he and the guys he was riding with coming back to Nashville enjoyed him and thanked me for them. And I thought that was so nice. But it was just such a coincidence, but maybe it wasn't a coincidence that we were supposed to meet there.
I was reading all about you on your website. Of course, I have played your music, your country songs and your gospel songs, I guess, for 40 years, going back to the 60s. Yeah. But I was reading your website, and I saw where that your favorite song is that old gospel song, Where No One Stands Alone.